Hi, this is Kelly Berthold of the Know Your Fundamentals podcast. This is a bonus episode of a recording of a radio show excerpt that I did with Nathaniel Lovell-Smith of the Penn State radio station. So I hope you enjoy.
So there's a little script at the beginning.
Okay.
It says, this is your weather campus forecast, brought to you by Penn State. We read the weather, and then there's like a little closing disclaimer afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to put our mics live.
Do I say the disclaimer too at the end?
I think we'll say the disclaimer at the halfway point. But that leads us to being on the air. We are.
Hey.
Good morning, everyone. I have a very special guest here, Kelly Berthold. Would you mind saying some things into your microphone so I can make sure your levels are...
Yeah, absolutely. Test.
Yeah, that works. And it looks like you have a script that I've handed in front of you.
Yes, I'm going to read the weather.
Excellent.
For everyone to hear my wonderful voice. This is your campus weather service forecast brought to you by Penn State Student Affairs. So now I'm going to read the weather. It is currently 57 degrees outside. It's going to be a bright and sunny day, up to about 82 degrees real feel, 85. And looks like completely clear weather. So no precipitation is expected.
I've even heard from some friends that they may be going stargazing this weekend because we might be having some clear skies. So that's something to look forward to too.
Absolutely. Are you aware of one of the darkest skies in Pennsylvania? Is that Cherry? I don't know exactly what it's called, but
Cherry Springs State Park. They are headed there.
Oh.
And so if you've got a car or someone who you know has a car, can take you the 2 hours north. And yeah, apparently some good stargazing this weekend.
Yeah, if you can do it even before the summertime on a spring, why not? Spring, wonderful, sunny. We have a couple warmer weeks and less rain, and the sun, I mean, I could feel like it's like osmosis, right? Like your body just goes, oh my gosh, something's happening. Why do I have all this energy? It's like, oh yeah, the sun is out. It's vitamin D circulating through your veins.
It's very simple. Slightly longer days. Your circadian rhythm is getting prepared to hoe the fields and prepare the great bounty that is the summer. So yeah, enjoy the weather if you can this weekend. But if you are tuned in right now, I hope you stay tuned in because we have quite an exciting show. Maybe you don't even know this, Kelly, but this show was largely inspired by your work, your outreach work that you helped supervise and be on. Maybe a year and a half ago?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago when we were starting, yeah.
Would you mind saying a little bit about what we did about a year ago? Because that really was the sort of the framework for thinking about how do we use outreach, how do we use radio, how do we use whatever we have at our disposal to disseminate resources that are helpful for individuals that they can use throughout their life.
Yeah. So I think like there's this fancy word that we sometimes like to use for it, although by no means do we have to put things so much in categories all the time, but it's like democratizing like wellness information. So how can I, proliferate and find different ways to be creative and innovative in my creativity to say, I notice these things are still not getting out there and they in many ways should be common knowledge. So how can we, take the resources and whether it's collaborations, whether it's, even just using our own creative influences and our interests, even if you're like just solo and you're like, I've got no one supporting me in this, but, I've got my little soapbox and I'm going to go out there and, just do the best that I can to be a part of that movement of providing information, like, grains of sand. So I always think about that, like how am I sprinkling grains of sand to like help individuals just have more access, but also like incorporate it into their lives. So we had an opportunity with the university to like work with arts and architecture to develop wellness workshops for their students. And I had a little bit of free reign to develop those workshops. It was like, okay, what do you think you can do? I'm like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do, at least in the confines of what a workshop, looks like in our kind of frames. Yeah.
And the mandate was wellness? What sort of like guidelines were you given?
Mental health workshops that were not clinical, right? So like, it was like, okay, how can we do this? Can we provide therapy services? Like, no, we cannot. That is something that is like, that is ethically and legally complicated. But if we're providing information and we're giving skills, we're not then processing trauma. We're not kind of getting into things that could be provoking discomfort. We're not there to cause anything. We're there to add to. And so workshops are there to add and to help people kind of like move things around in their minds a little bit to be more open and receptive to information, and maybe also have some takeaways. For me, it's always like they have to take something away. So with those workshops, we were able to focus on just like topics. But for me, the topics that I'm so passionate about are like the foundations of mental wellness,
Right.
and I call them part of my business is know your fundamentals. Like that's my brand, mentals being capitalized, because the foundations, if we don't really understand them, I feel like we're kind of like painting walls and we're putting picture frames up.
Or just putting out lots of little fires without addressing the actual underlying problem.
Right. Like if you buy a house and the foundation of your house is cracked, good luck selling that house, right? It's going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of time. And so and there's so many different metaphors that I think just in real life that also just work really well to thinking about our own house of well-being. So for me, I don't like spending time putting up pictures or like just, let's just like smudge over that crack a little.
Painting
and
walls,
you're going to, it's just
around furniture.
Exactly. So if we know the foundations, then those things can really be helpful.
But to that point, we're attracted to doing the superficial things because maybe it seems easier and a quick fix. But then you get a slight conflict there where we're trying to do sort of easy dissemination. And actually, by no means is it easy, but we're trying to do things that people can do. And yet it is complicated work. It's that sort of deep, you need contractors, for instance. And so how do you bridge between trying to provide very simplified versions of these fundamentals and at the same time recognizing that it's a lot of work?
Yeah. So for me, over the years, it's been about connecting the dots between I like to say that I'm a master of none. I like this beginner's mindset thing. And some of the actual reason why I decided to do more of be a social worker, because I'm a licensed clinical social worker, is because I cared about the outreach work. I'm not as interested in the research, because to me, it's like we have the research. Now, how are we getting it out there? So for me, just thinking about how we have all this science and research available, right? And we've been able to, over the last 50 or so years of, science and technology, really been able to see the data, right? And articulate the data in a way it's this is truly evidence-based, right? And we also have the data to see how the science and even some of these models of intervention affect individuals across populations, right? So for me, I was connecting the dots between all these different fields and models of intervention and saying, this is the psychoeducation. So that fancy word of psychoeducation is how are our brains and bodies built, and how understanding just the basics of those things connects those other dots. So how do we help people just get to know their bodies and their brains a little bit better, take out shame, because shame's often, about character. It's this isn't about your character. This is just how you're built. Oh, okay. Now what? Well, let me tell you. Here's some skills that can help you build, neural connections or build relationships now that you know these basics.
Well, I mean, shame is that. I mean, that's a really interesting idea that there's this block to understanding ourselves from a sort of very realistic, fundamental way. In your work, trying to get individuals to understand these fundamentals, you mentioned shame. What are the things getting in the way of us being able to understand ourselves and appraise ourselves realistically?
Yeah. So, if I'm thinking about the emotional experiences, I often will kind of connect Maslow's hierarchy of needs with even these basic 3 layers of the brain, reptilian brain. And you may remember us because I was teaching this even with the workshop where we were. The reptilian brain are your basic and survival needs. And then you have the mammalian brain, which is your social connection and attachment. And then you have your primate brain, generally, your executive functioning around 25, 30 years old is fully developed. And we call that your primate brain or your autonomy. So those are your esteem and your higher order needs. And I think of it, Maslow's hierarchy more like a pie chart, and that's ebbing and flowing. You want to have a homeostasis among these things. And that at any given time you could have needs with your reptilian brain, your mammalian brain. They're communicating needs. And we have thoughts and we have physical sensations and we have emotions that make us feel uncomfortable. So when we can label that discomfort and go, I'm feeling a knot in my stomach. I wonder what that is. Oh, I'm feeling maybe that emotion of anxiety. I wonder what it's communicating to me. I'm having this thought of, I don't know if I should do this. Is it really that I shouldn't do this thing? Or is it that I'm afraid? Oh, well, I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt myself. Okay. Survival need. I'm afraid that I'm going to be rejected. Okay. Mammalian need, right? I'm afraid that if I don't do well with this, and this is the thing that I'm so incredibly passionate about, what will I do next? That's an autonomy need, right?
Yeah.
So self-actualization. So I think that when we know, again, these foundational elements of like even just our biology and how our minds work, it connects the dots with all these like theoretical things. When we're talking, oh, well, tell me about your family. Tell me about what your fears are.
Right.
We can connect it right back. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, now we can problem solve through it. Or in DBT language, we can do opposite action, change the emotion that's not effective for you. So again, like we can connect these skills. And I don't think that we need 3,000 page books to provide something that can truly affect and help a lot of people.
Well, I really like the literal dismantling of the Maslow's hierarchy, because although it's important that we need to breathe before we need food, before we need shelter, before we need family, etc., it's never that stationary. It is fluid, and you have all these pieces coming together, and yet we don't want to discount them because they do have such an impact on the reptilian brain, on the primate brain, on the humanness.
Absolutely.
So I'm starting to see how you're connecting these fundamentals, you're dismantling them from this sort of rigid way in which we, I think, frequently talk about them, and rather think about how do you connect each one at any given moment to some sort of momentary experience, some sort of problem that we might be having in life. This is the part that I'm most excited to talk to you about. What do we do next? Like, yes, I'm hungry and I'm worried that my friends are going to leave me. So what? What do I do from that?
Yeah. So in kind of like, so I developed this program, I call it the Fundamentals Life, Family, and Career Accelerator. And it's kind of connecting the science and the skills across your personal life, your relationships, parenting, and your career, because all the same information is adaptable everywhere. And some of my beef a little bit with how we disseminate information anymore is it's so fragmented and it's so capitalist niche. If I'm gonna, it's like, well, this is my business and this is what I sell. And, these are my fancy words for describing the same things, expletive, the same things, and across all these different fields. Is that people are confused because they're riding through this wellness ocean, and everyone has
way of describing it.
I'm full of metaphors. But we have this ocean and we're saying, hey, we have all of this. And so much of it even is true. And so much of it is based on my own perception or whatever I want to kind of just like sell on the world. People don't know how to navigate it. Right. And so, yes, the wellness industry is a multi-billion-dollar business and it's only expected to grow. But how much of that is actually helping people, again, beyond just like maybe best case scenario, smudging over the walls a little bit, worst case scenario, causing more damage because it's not evidence backed and it's not supported.
Right. Everyone's focusing on the picture frames when the house is on fire.
Right. And they don't know the difference because they are looking for something that actually helps them with the whole thing. But I don't see it. And I'm also kind of like angry that like we have all these institutions that are like, well, we do this for, this particular population of children, or we do this is like that because that's research. But we have to have broader ways of disseminating basic information that can help large groups of people where you're only putting out small fires and you're not, aiding into like the larger situation. So, but to come back to like your original question is, when individuals know how these things apply across their lives and the information is attainable and you can, so if we think about television shows, right, and like we can translate those into different languages. We can also take the same information and translate it for different languages. We can translate it for different age populations. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to translate it. And we also have the information to help it land in the ears of different populations, generations, cultural groups, etc. Yes, it takes work, but it's not creating a whole new thing and creating new words around things that we already know. So we need more organized language around the same concepts. We're not doing that, but I'm trying to do that, saying, hey, you can hear this in 500 other ways. It's still the same thing. A horse by any other name is still a horse, but there's another word for you. I say a lot. But when we know that information, and then we also, like, I am trained in a lot of behavioral models of intervention. So, for example, dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, mindfulness-based stress reduction. Those are things that are somatic, connecting ourselves to our body, and they are also connecting us to social relationships. And DBT, for example, I love DBT skills because, one, it's been found to be very effective over the last 30 or so years for a variety of different populations, including children and adolescents. But also, those are human skills. And Marsha Linehan is a Zen master. So, like, she understands how to connect this to, like, just being present and aware. So even DBT integrates John Kabat-Zinn's work from mindfulness-based stress reduction. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy integrated John Kabat-Zinn's work from mindfulness-based stress reduction. And even CBT, like, all is informed with DBT. So again, we see these intersections. They seem, to someone who's as an outsider that's not a therapist and not a researcher, they seem separate. They don't know the difference.
Right.
So you can take these skills, and the skills across, they may be described in different ways, but they're still the same skills, right? So taking those skills and organizing them based on, hey, first we're going to start on survival needs, because if you don't know how to have distress tolerance, it's really hard for you to, like, be aware and do anything else when your body is just overwhelmed. So we can learn distress tolerance skills and connect that to our survival needs. We can learn interpersonal effectiveness skills and mindfulness skills and emotional regulation skills to help with, like, whole brain thinking. Daniel Siegel's work, I think, does a really great job also in describing these things for younger populations and parents, right? So, and then we can think about, like, the science of human flourishing. So University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I think Penn State and University of Virginia, and there may be another school that I'm forgetting, so I apologize for that, but they have years and years of research working with, I forget what the Dalai Lama's Institute is, but they've been studying the science of human flourishing, and the 4 pillars are awareness, insight, connection, and purpose. We can see how that's also connected with everything else too. It's not in isolation. It's finding intersections. We got to connect roads and highways together. Yeah. But there are skills for every stage. There's something that can aid in that neuroplasticity of building personal, individual experiences and social experiences. And I think it can change the world.
I echo that enthusiasm. And when I hear about all these skills, I can see how they're all connected to each other behaviorally, how they're connected to each other from a distress tolerance perspective, but also a human flourishing perspective. But maybe to a listener who is not a therapist or a researcher is just hearing more individual things. And so what is the connector? How does the the person driving down 99 right now listening to us, and hopefully they'll stay tuned in, what's their entry point into all of this? Or do you have to, I don't know, start and look at it all? I mean, yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, I think the entry point for all of this is just trying to find somewhere where you can, Robert Sobalski, are you familiar with Robert Sobalski? He wrote a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And I think he's definitely not a therapist, but I think he's from Stanford. But learning about how your brain and your body work is a necessary thing to do. Okay. Because if you don't understand why your body is biologically wired for even connection as a mammal, or you don't understand, okay, so I go to the gym and you're telling me to build these habits. What does that even mean? It means that you're strengthening the neural plasticity in your brain. So there's a lot of books that talk about these segments, but what I'm trying, and I'm actually providing a training for clinicians coming up, we need, and therapists and people who are authors and writers, we need to spend more time in the psychoeducation and doing, like, the full circle of the need to knows, which is why I call, like, know your fundamentals. You need to know these foundations. So when we can know, again, like, the basics of just how our brain work, how our breathing affects our nervous system, and how that allows us even to, like, calm down, how our, even our gut, like the health of our gut microbiome has an impact on like our emotions and our thinking and our feeling. These things are all interconnected. But again, like you're going to pick up a book and it's going to be fragmented. It's not necessarily going to tell you all those things. Robert Sapolsky's book was the first book that I was like, holy crap, like this is actually, connecting some of these dots for me. And I think I was an undergrad when I was reading that book, and I had as a psychology, and I was like, this is not even a psychology book, and it's making all this psychology information make so much more sense to me because I'm understanding it on, again, like that really like human biological level. And so when I'm saying human, it's not even just interpersonal. It's like, I need to know what my body is doing. So I feel more in control of my body. So I have more control of my choices. Whether you're doing therapy or whether you're looking up things online, ask the question when you're reading about like, okay, this is good, like human connection is good for you, or you should go out and do A, B, and C thing. Say, what's the context? Why does this actually help me and my body? And you might even be able to very quickly Google, why is social connection good for my body? And AI may say, hey, this is all the, whatever we're pulling up here. And then look at the, the things that are coming up that are actually related to research institutions and not someone's blog, travel blog that said, this is really good. It's okay. Let's check the facts. And those are things that we learn in elementary school, hopefully in middle school, like, hey, you need to check your resources. You need to check your sources, check their sources. First and foremost, be curious. If you can be curious about whatever it is that you're ingesting that's helping you on your wellness, mental, emotional, social, physical wellness journey, ask the question, why is this actually helping me? And then if I understand that foundation of why it's helping me and my body, I understand the method to the madness. And I can then feel that there's more motivation and more trust in the process because I don't just think it's fluff. And even if you don't actively think in your mind, like I'm saying the word, this is fluff or this is BS, your body goes, I don't know. I feel like I don't have enough evidence to really buy into this yet. And that leads to doubt. And doubt then also has an impact on us really benefiting from even the most like effective and evidence-based practices because you have clients coming in and again, all different walks of life. It doesn't have to necessarily be therapy. And they're halfway through, they're a step in, but they're mostly out because they're like, I'll give this a chance. But if it doesn't feel, I'm doing air quotes right now, if it doesn't feel right, I'm not going to keep coming back. Well, now we're subject to choice of our emotions. Our emotions are information. They're not facts. But again, learning how to do that is a skill. Learning how to listen to yourself is a skill. But if you don't know those foundations, it's really, really hard to like just buy in and keep doing the work.
Yeah, just this reminder to use the body as a collaborator, and not as a separate thing. And I think we're the deck's stacked against us because we refer to things like mental health as if it's different than just health in general.
Right.
And even the term mindfulness has a way of making it sound like it's just about your thoughts. When really we know when you dig just honestly one page deeper into mindfulness, it's very much about reconnecting to the body. And so using how we are as biological creatures, and I don't want to say we need to have good gut biome systems or our knees have to not be grazed, but rather just being aware of how our biology works as a factor into the mind is very powerful. It reminds me of a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, who was reviewing this sort of ancient, actually not ancient at all, new philosophical statement by Descartes, I think therefore I am. And Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist, full guru that he was, says, actually, I think, therefore I'm not. And by trying to solve everything in our heads or to make our mental health just mental and our brain just our brain, and to think of it separate from both our body, but also the connection that we have, the world that we're in, is to completely miss the whole point. And so I think to exactly what you're saying, mindfulness and foundational mental health comes down to reconnecting not just to what's happening in our quote unquote head, I'm now using air quotes, but really, what does that mean for our relationships? What does that mean for how we're sleeping? What does it mean for how I feel in my body when I am having a thought that things are going badly? And I also, just going back to this idea of removing the shame does seem to creep up for all sorts of reasons, but it does seem to creep up predominantly when we don't have answers for why our brain is doing what it is. And so trying to recognize that the brain is just in collaboration and partnership with the body can actually start to get away with that shame and to start seeing things for what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I'll throw another metaphor out for you, but I always, I kind of talk to individuals that I would say that I work with, but I talk to everyone about this. I'm always on a soapbox. It's my brain. I'm just so passionate about this. But you are the captain, right, of your body and your brain ship, right? Mm-hmm. And you have crew members, and those are your emotions, your physical sensations, even the sense of shame. Like when people are coming in, it's like, how do I get rid of this feeling? Listen to it. Yes. It's a crew member. It's got information for you to help you navigate your life, nice right? Analogy. And if that shame is saying, hey, this makes me feel bad about myself, I feel like there's something like inherently wrong with me, that's a thought. But if we practice just leaning into befriending that shame, it's like, tell me more. And if I'm working with parents and they're, parent coaching, or I'm talking to like an individual, it's like, what's the context? You have to listen and be willing to have a conversation with yourself or other people to hear the context. And the truth is in the context. It's not in the surface. You have to listen more deeply to like what is being communicated. And that's like active listening is a great social skill. It's also active listening to ourselves. We are losing touch and just being quiet. And even like that mindful awareness, and you're kind of like talking about like, we have to connect, and to connect, you have to listen. And that means that the discomfort of even listening is really only coming from the fact that your body's saying, you're not used to doing this. Are you sure you want to do this thing? It's like, yes, I do. And I hear that you're uncomfortable because you're not accustomed to this. That's the context, right? But if our brain is always just jumping to discomfort's bad, eliminate it, right? Pain is bad, eliminate it. Emotions are bad, eliminate them. You're only going to become more and more disconnected. So if we can feel like we're just connecting in and listening in, whether it's shame or anything else, that ability to just be present with listening to what that crew member has to say. Right. And then trusting yourself that you can do whole brain thinking. That's a Daniel Siegel thing, right? I can use my complex reasoning. I can connect it with my emotions. I can connect it with my fears, and I can bring the whole brain trust together and say, what do you think we should do about this? Okay, now I have options to either accept things as they are. So options for solving problems. You can either problem solve. So that means that you have some control of something. You actually do something about it. Okay, so I can problem solve.
You're lucky if you're in that situation.
Exactly, right? And you can tolerate the problem. So I can accept my response to the problem and also what's actually happening as the problem. I can emotionally regulate through the problem. So I don't like how this is, but I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to
change my relationship to the problem.
Exactly, right. And then I can stay miserable. So wallow, right? So like just, I say like roll in the mud, just like, I'm not kidding. I'm like, it's cold and wet. Like, feel it, but like, let's kind of like navigate the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll add, there's one more I like to add, which is you can exacerbate the problem. Pour gasoline over the fire.
Yeah.
just let it burn, which I think always reminds us that these things are in our power to do, and it's our choice to either wallow or exacerbate. Yeah. We're going to pause for just a quick moment to play our bottom of the hour commercials, and then we'll be right back. You're listening to The Line, 90.7 FM. Stay tuned. Ta-da!
Good conversation.
Isn't this fun?
Yeah.
I'm going, because what I really want to, there's so many things I want to ask, but one thing that I'm going to ask is, you'll have to read the disclaimer.
Okay.
Thank you.
You let me know when.
We'll probably do it right afterwards. And then something I'm curious about is, you have psychoeducation. On the one side, you have psychotherapy.
Yeah.
One-on-one, expensive, long time, but also well professional. And on the other side, you have a book that gets disseminated for as far as it needs to, and has a lot of the problems, I think, with a lot of the wellness industry that we see. I'm curious about this big old space in between that is other.
Yeah.
And what that might mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what.
If you're comfortable with me talking about how I'm approaching the other. And,
yes. That's exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's effectively what this is.
Yeah. Then what's the middle ground here?
Yeah. Because no one really knows about it. People know how to write books and try and make as much money as they can, and people know therapy, but there's so much more that we just don't know how to talk with.
Yeah. And like, and then it's an app, right? It's like I have a meditation app. But again, that doesn't get to the teaching the deeper issues there. Yeah.
And also maybe just even thinking about, as you've actively been working on that middle ground, what's it been like? What have you discovered? So anyone, particularly me, might want to do also to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. The zero, should I read the disclaimer?
I'll come back on.
Okay.
And then I'll just ask you to read the disclaimer.
This is working cool.
I forgot how long. Yeah, something that I love is that despite the fact that we're in this glass box, no one looks in.
No. Because people
will look and they'll see their reflection, but they won't even bother to see two people staring at them.
Oh, weird.
Okay, here we go.
How do I read this part?
I think we'll get to that.
Okay.
You're listening to the Line 90.7 FM with my guest co-host, Kelly Berthold, where we are talking about wellness, and specifically, how does the individual who is approaching wellness get the most out of it, given the fact that there are so many ways in which we seem to approach it, be it from books to psychotherapy to TikTok videos, God forbid. And so we're going to try to keep getting to the bottom of that. But before we begin, we have a disclaimer. Kelly, would you mind reading the disclaimer?
You're listening to Nathaniel's show. The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely of those producing it or the people appearing on the program, such as myself, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the Lion 90.7 FM, its staff, sponsors, or the Pennsylvania State University. For details and a copy of the transcript of today's broadcast, email officers@thelion.fm or write to the Lion.7 FM WKPS. That is 125 Hub Robeson Center, University Park, PA.
Ta-da! We have disclaimed. Now we can continue with the conversation. Thank you for doing that. So as I was just mentioning, there's this big old gap between the classic, almost cliche at this point, self-help wellness book, and then there is the very unique, special, but hard to disseminate psychotherapy room. And in between that, psychoeducation and wellness and these fundamentals that you speak of, there's kind of a white space, and it's not really clear how we might do it. We might do it over radio, self-plug there, but really, I'm curious, what have you found as you've actively embarked on this process?
Yeah.
How do you go about sharing these materials in a way that makes sense for people?
Yeah. So for me, and I work full time at the university. I have a 4-year-old, soon to be 5-year-old at home. I've been working on this. Yes. And I have been working on this since, what was that year? 2023, I think. Maybe 2022. I can't remember. It's been a couple of years. So I have been really grinding in any other waking moment of my day and doing this for the past few years. Once I had the idea of know your fundamentals. But for me, so much of this is it's acts of community service, and it's also acts of business development. And I've had to kind of strategize, again, very much on my own, of what are ways that I can research and navigate a whole slew? Like if there's all these different ways of providing information, how can I personally do it ethically without hopefully losing my job? Sure. But also like ethically, it's like, okay, well, maybe I do lose my job at some point, but like, do I feel like this is still the thing that I need to do? Or it's like, yes, then this is, I'm working within my social work ethical confines. And now how would I make it? So some of it has been, seeing what I can do with the university to provide some of this, and whether it's with the community or with the university. Yes, we were able to do some of that, but even in the training that I will be providing, later in the summer, it will be focusing on how to incorporate psychoeducation and cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's training therapists.
Sure.
So I want to do that. I also want to, do workshops, trainings for businesses and corporations and really whoever will have me, so I can, again, bridge, what they call it, like organizational psychology. Like organizational psychology is still psychology. So like bridging what I've been calling like well-being and teaming, which isn't like limited to, but it's bringing the foundations there and saying this is what it is from a wellness perspective, a holistic personal wellness perspective. Now, let's actually connect those dots to, organizational psychology, or what you're trying to do in the workplace to, help Gen Z, work better with, older, millennials or what have you. It's like, it's social skills, and those social skills, whether you call them in an HR workshop, something different, it doesn't make them different.
Yeah.
And also, they're only going to be fluff if you're only focusing on this. Then also doing podcasts. So I have the Know Your Fundamentals podcast, which right now is, in business terms, they say like, well, who's your audience? Right now, my audience is like, who are the people who may be the most in need right now and have the most limited time? Professional mothers. Like, oh, my own ideal client avatar, as they like to say, like a business, speak. But but it's for everybody. So, okay, I'm bridging all these gaps in life, family, relationships, parenting, and career here. I'm trying to do it here. I'm trying to do it with clinicians. I'm also trying to do it in my accelerator program that I'm developing. I haven't launched it yet, but I'm getting closer. It's an online course with group coaching or individual coaching with me. So they go through the organized start to finish, A to Z, and week to week they have skills that they're practicing, and then they come to me for group. We know, and again, like from research perspective, that individuals learn so much when they go into groups, right? So it's not isolated, that you actually will learn and have an accelerated learning if you're in a group through that learning process. So I'm developing an online course with coaching to provide this and making that national and international. That requires advertising. So like all these things that you have to like kind of learn in the process. And then I'm also going to be taking that and like incorporating that book, and then trying to take that book and then trying to break it down into younger populations. And so I can take again those foundational fundamentals and translate it for stories or workshops that are also helping educators and like local school and academic institutions. So it's the same information, but we need to disseminate it in a variety of different ways. Right. So for me, the middle ground between psychology or like doing therapy and just putting a book out there and saying, well, I hope I get someone who wants to publish it, is all the work in the middle of how do I disseminate important information. And really, it's up to me to figure that out. And if something beneficial comes from it later on, fantastic. But I can't wait for it, right? All I can do is just keep putting in the work and seeing what kind of like happens through, again, those grains of sand, right?
Yeah.
So I'm spreading out. It's like, oh, Kelly, how are you doing all those things? I don't know, but I am doing those things. And if I'm doing it, it's not at 100%. I can't wait for 100%, right? I'm not going to wait until I'm 55 years old to like do this thing that feels important. Right. You just got to do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's amazing about this is that it somehow requires both some internal call, some sense of what it is that you're trying to do, and yet a total openness as to what it might become.
Yeah.
Your water running down a hill, you're not exactly sure where it's going to go.
But I am confined in the water. I know what I know what I consist of. Right. I know my elements.
Yes.
Right. I don't know the road, but I'm very secure. And, what is a plan without a strategy? And what is a strategy without understanding what is that you even are or what you do? Mm-hmm. Right. So the strategy is unfolding. And that's like some of these concepts that we're talking about, like this present awareness. All these skills that I teach, I also feel like I know deeply. And so like, I feel like I don't feel shame or insecurity. I mean, yes, you feel those things, but again, I listen to them as information. And then I also like the moment by moment of just navigating that next moment without being lost in a fog. Things just naturally unravel. Do they unravel as fast as I want them to? No, but I understand that impatience even is communicating to me like, you care so much about this, you just want to do it. So like I have really good buddy relationships, I feel like, with myself most of the time. Yes, I still argue with my crewmates on occasion, but it's not disastrous and it's not overly distracting. Yeah. So that clarity, I think, for me, and just that innate sense of trust that I have within myself, which isn't just like born. I put the work and the skills in. I don't think people need to spend the money that I did in education and trainings to get to where I am now. But again, that's a part of the work. So I feel very secure in what I've created. And the creation is the combination of what other people have discovered. but I don't know what's unfolding, but I'm willing to go in that journey. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's so, I mean, contrasted, I would say, to how I see a lot of academia working, where you are knowing exactly where you're going. You're going to graduate school, and then after graduate school, you're going in these sorts of steps, and you need to publish in these kinds of ways. And the path is laid out so much so that you're not even very concerned about where you'll be, just how you're going to get there. And this is flipped in the sense that you're not necessarily so worried about how you're going to get there, because the core of what's pushing you, the momentum, the stream of water that is making these paths, is so certain that it's going to run downhill. You just have to be able to monitor where it's going. And that just, it's brave, it's scary, I think, to a lot of people who know exactly what, want exact paths laid out in front of them. This path isn't certain, but at the same time, you have a lot of trust. As you've sort of embarked on this process, working what sounds like 2.5 full-time jobs, what surprises have you found? And if anything, maybe for others trying to follow in your wake, are there paths that they can take that will make the same sort of goals, the same sort of ambitions more clean? I mean, did you come up against barriers that you now know how to get around? Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, some of the fundamentals of any personal journey or any learning experience is that the hill is always the highest when you're starting out. And so like it's the anticipation and not being able to see like really anything beyond this big wall in front of you. Like, I had this idea, now what? Right. And chipping away at that at the beginning, it requires a lot of trust falling on yourself over and over again. And again, I think some of the benefit of all these other years of me providing this information in context where I wasn't necessarily, I went on the path of like, okay, you get the degree, you do these things, yes, you're very passionate about it, but it wasn't until like I had the vulnerability of this idea that I'm like, how are other people going to judge me for getting out of the box? So it's like, am I going to get in trouble with a board at some point? Like, how do I make sure I protect myself? What if people like just don't like me for what I'm doing here? Right. So like when you're doing something that feels really important to you and it also feels really, really risky, that's more gravity, it's like it's this bigger force pushing against you, because now it's not just like, okay, I'm going in this path and it's hard doing this path, but I see at least the outline of destinations. Can't predict everything, but one of our biggest fears as human beings is the unknown. And you add more and more social unknowns and, financial unknowns and time unknowns. And even just like, what if it doesn't work? Like I was kind of talking about that with like self-actualization, right? Had lots of those like, well, what if it doesn't? And then I just reflect back on like, I'm okay with that. Cause it just feels so right for me just to do the thing anyway. But like those skills have helped me just weather the storms of the extreme discomforts. And even some of like, I thought I knew what burnout was. Now I really know what burnout is. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know that I just fell 20 feet into a chasm, but here I am trying to recover for 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, how can I speed up this recovery? It's like, girl, you can't. You just gotta like chill. So those things still happen. Like the pain still happens, the insecurity, the dread still happens. But how you relate to all of that, I think, just helps you. Have you ever seen, there's, I think, a documentary, what's his name? He climbed that one, he's a free rock climber.
Free solo.
Free solo, yes. I think, when I think back to that, like the fearlessness that he exhibits, some people will never feel. And I think he said even then, like, I don't really feel fear. It's like people do. So it's not like you're never really going to get to a point of not feeling fear. Fear, if you feel it or you don't feel, whatever your relation to your body is, it's biological, it's genetic. There's a lot of components to that. You can't necessarily just stop wherever your natural baseline is with fear. And you don't let it have to control your life. So we make trust-based decisions or we make fear-based decisions. And so if we can come down to being able to be in that fork of the road of, this feels like something that is terrifying to me, and I can connect the dots of where is it that, where, what, who, when, what can make the sense of the context, and now ultimately be in that fork of the road of saying, now what? So do I listen to that fear because it's legitimate and I really should do something or behave off of it? Or much of the time it's, now you do the thing that feels scary because you're just not used to it yet. And your
Right.
body's saying, you don't know what's going to happen. Well, thank you, body, for telling me
Yeah,
that
this
this is new. And you have all these different, points where you're showing me on the graph of like, you don't know all these different like data points. They're not going to happen. You have no idea. I'm like, I know. You're going to do it anyway. It's like, yeah. It's like, okay. So those are,
Thanks for listening to me.
thanks for listening. Those are conversations that we learn to have with ourselves, and those trust-based decisions help navigating that mountain climb a little bit easier. So yes, it's very, very steep at first, but then once you get through like, the minutia and all the force, and your body builds a resiliency and the endurance through the experience, experiential learning is the most important thing of anything. So you can't just learn through information. You have to learn through experience. And there aren't often shortcuts for that.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself out there. The combination of information and experience is wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? Wisdom, that's real knowledge. Knowledge comes from knowing. Deep knowing comes from your experience, not again from just like learning a definition. So it's worth the knowledge. It's worth the journey and the wisdom. If you feel like there's this pull for you to do something, listen to it. Write out your values and your priorities, and like look at it, and then say, how do I just take those steps? Whether they're big or small, you can navigate them. The more you trust yourself in navigating just that, that force against you, it will get easier. But your body has to build muscular almost endurance to, running a marathon is going to hurt first, but it's going to get easier over time the more that you're training on a day-to-day basis. So you just got to keep at it.
I really like this. It's hardest when you're first looking at the hill analogy. And I think, if I may, your experience as a therapist really sort of shines here, observing a lot of individuals who, when they come to therapy for the first time, are in effect looking at that hill properly for the first time. They're not halfway up it, they're not at the top of it, they are at the bottom of it, but they're looking at it.
Yeah.
And that first session, but really that first moment in therapy, be it the first few seconds, but maybe the first few sessions, that is the moment where an individual is really coming to terms with whether they are going to listen to this fear voice and say, thank you for your advice, I'm still going to go forward with this, or to run away in the opposite direction. And so you have been in that situation from the therapist side so many times, and you've now shared that you've also been that for your own self down at the bottom of the hill. How does one engender for others, in effect, what you are trying to do when individuals are for the first time looking at that hill? It's almost like, I think we could all give good advice to the person who's halfway up the hill.
Yeah.
And we could definitely cheer on the person who's at the top. But what do we do for ourselves, and also for individuals who are for the first time really looking at that hill?
Yeah. So again, it comes back down to, if it's therapy, or even if I'm like sitting with, I was talking to a women's entrepreneurial group the other day, but it's, awareness. If I'm going to give a cheat code, right?
Sure.
It's awareness, acceptance, and choice. Okay.
What were the 4 pillars again of human development?
Awareness, insight, connection, and purpose. So even if I broke those down a little bit too, that the more you can become aware of things that are happening and the reality for things as they actually are,
including the body and the mind.
Body, mind, everything. So like, this is the reality. These are the facts. I am feeling this thing. I am thinking this thing. And if I can just see that non-judgmentally, that awareness leads to accurate information. And so we are much more likely, if you were to tell yourself like, I'm fine, and you do that for a week and you just try to convince yourself that you're fine the entire time, what ends up actually happening is that your choices are going to be based on not reality. And then you're going to be making choices that may not actually be beneficial for you in the short term or long term, or even line up with like your wants, your dreams, your goals, and all those things, because you're denying your own reality, right? So if you ever want to make good choices, you have to listen, and you have to listen to yourself and the reality for what things are, because then you'll see choices more clearly. I kind of say it's like going from, Wizard of Oz, a black and white, to like full technicolor, spectacular, like technicolor. It's like I can see all these different things now, and I can see the choices more clearly, and I can see the ones that I actually want even more clearly.
Right.
And we do that through awareness. Awareness leads to then deeper insight. So now I have a deeper understanding of myself, my wants, the things that are important to me, what's working, what's not working, what's working in my environment, what are the problems in the world, what are the problems in my community. I can have deeper insight. And then I can have, through that insight, I have a deeper connection with myself, which also helps me have a deeper connection with other people. So I can then take my resources and decide how I'm connecting with myself and how I want to that, contribute that and my interests and my passions and meaningful activity and share that with other people. I can do that now based on authentic truth and not just people pleasing, right? And so then those connections lead to more purposeful living, right? Purpose is meaningful living. It's not, oh, I have one purpose in life. It's we can live purposefully by just being more aware and having a deeper insight in the truth of ourselves and other people, having better connections. And that meaningful activity will make the world a better place. And it will also make you feel like you're having a more satisfying life, the life that you actually want, right? So
starting with awareness.
It starts with awareness and then acceptance, right? So I kind of like grouped that acceptance piece in the awareness pillar, but you have to accept reality. And then from there, you can see the fork and you have choice.
Yeah.
And then connecting that to psychoeducation. So like I never start therapy. It doesn't matter if you're a kid. It doesn't matter if you are, older. It doesn't matter where you're from. I always start with psychoeducation. You have a negativity bias. You're not going to want to be here. You're going to have doubts. Like it's coming from this part of your brain. It's okay. And so it helps people with that psychoeducation relax into saying, I understand where it's coming from. Yeah. Even though I don't know why, and I don't know how I got here, I understand a little bit of those foundations now, and that helps me trust more of this experience of navigating the next steps to come a little bit more into the door, right? So the number one predictor of good therapy is the therapeutic relationship, right? And at the same time, I think if we were to add more psychoeducation in the forefront, I think we would find that would exponentially increase good therapy.
Yeah, and I think often we talk about psychoeducation as being an important part of therapy, but we rush it quite quickly, trying to get to those parts. And
we want to get to your problems. We want to get to like why you want to organize a room.
I do think that it's not just the therapist who can make that mistake, but I think it's also the client. I've been inspired by your analogies, so I'm gonna take a stab at one of my own. We're all in our own way looking up at that hill for the first time at any given moment. And our impulse is to immediately throw in our crampons and just start hiking up that hill. And sure enough, we're going to get to, a few miles up that hill and we're going to realize we didn't pack any food. Or, oh my goodness, I don't even know if this is the right way to the top. And instead of that rush to climb the hill or even rush away from it, I imagine us sitting down, opening up a box of paints and just painting that mountain. Just sitting there and maybe painting it for a year, not a literal year, but so that you can see the mountain in different seasons. You can see, oh, actually, at this point in time, it's not very possible, but at this time, it completely opens up. And oh, look at all the food that I can get on this mountain at these points. But really focusing it all on awareness, getting that individual to accept what things are as they are in a moment of appreciation before trying to either run towards it or run away. You mentioned 2 mindfulness-based therapies already, 3 if actually you include the ones that don't explicitly say mindfulness in their name. I think that's where we start to creep into like, well, how do you answer the question of where does awareness come from? Well, I think it starts from tiny little moments of sand, like you said.
Yeah, just noticing. Awareness is, well, the definition of mindfulness is being attentive and aware of the present moment, mentally without getting carried away by anything.
Not climbing up a hill.
Not climbing up the hill. You're just standing still and you're listening, you're noticing, and you're attempting to do it without adding additional judgments, which is kind of like getting carried away. Those are just descriptors. So if we can just be present and just observe, so like with DBT, it's like observe, describe, participate, non-judgmentally, one mindfully, effectively, separating those things a little bit to like give perspective of what I'm trying to do in that experience, right? So again, like those are skills. We all have innate capacity to do those things, but our awareness necessarily of them or their benefits, right? Again, it's that doubt of, am I doing it right? We always feel so insecure of whether we're doing things right or other people know how to do things that we don't know how to do.
Judgment.
Yep. Yeah. So self-trust starts with just being aware and okay with what you're experiencing. And if you are constantly insecure of like, or denial of your own experiences, you're not connected.
Yeah.
So trust allows for growth.
Yeah. Improvement starts not with a step forward, but with an awareness of one's surroundings and experience. This has been truly wonderful. It's both been a huge joy to have you explain a lot of these things that you taught me a year ago, but also just very inspiring as I think about how I might be able to do the sort of similar outreach work that you do. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah. Can I share a quote quick before we wrap up?
Please, of course, share many. It's
all right.
Possible.
Well, this is one of my favorite quotes, and it's also one of the things that I kind of live by. But give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. That's it. So that's how I try to do all of this. So I'm in it for the lifetime, not just appeasing the moment.
Well, here's to a bountiful catch for everyone, you, me, our listeners. Stay tuned on the live, 90.7 FM. We'll be back next Thursday at 8 a.m. And Kelly, thank you again. I very much appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, and the music?
Awesome. That was so good. Yeah.